A leopard gecko tank has to be around 2 foot by maybe 1.5 feet, so they have more land space and height as they do not climb up walls. They will need 2 or 3 hides, one over the hot end, one in the cool end, and a moist hide. However, sometimes the cold hide can double up as a moist hide. They will also need a water bowl. And if you like, you can give them some plants, but not too many because they can sometimes take up a lot of room. Crested geckos will need a taller tank, so I have 60 by 45 by 45 centimetres. You can fill it with lots of plants, vines and wooden pieces so that they can crawl up, and you can make a whole little rainforest in a terrarium. Another thing that's good to invest in is some sort of ledge where they can feed from, because they don't tend to eat on the ground. Also, they do not require a water bowl because they won't generally drink standing water. So what you have to do is spray the tank about twice a day because they tend to drink off of the leaves. Now, looking after a vivarium for a leopard gecko I find really easy. So in this one, so it's the evening time, so I look around in their tank. This is Diego's. I can see he's kicked dirt in his water, so obviously you give them fresh water all the time. And every maybe 2 days I go and scoop out any toilets, which brilliantly for leopard geckos, they almost all go in the same place. An exception though is Ziggy. She goes everywhere and kicks it around, so I am actually thinking of maybe trying to toilet train her in a way, maybe moving it to one spot and see if she sort of picks up my message, like just go there. But other than that, leopard gecko tank maintenance is really simple. So firstly, you've got to go on a search around looking for droppings. Yeah, you don't usually find any of the feces on the wall. It somehow drops, and I usually find it in the moss. If you don't remove it, say you wait a day or two, I don't know if it's just because I use EcoAir for moss and obviously it has to be humid, but sometimes it can grow fluff, which is disgusting, so make sure you remove that. This tank has quite good ventilation, but you do still get mould. Another thing I've just been doing is washing this down slightly, just with some water. When I do a proper wash, I will really give it like a scrub, but you won't be able to see, but there's also, where you have to spray it every day of water, you do get like watermarks on it, and it is a little bit rough, so that is another thing you've got to do. So when it comes to tank, like looking after the tank, there's a lot more effort goes into looking after the tank for a crested gecko. Leopard geckos require live food. I always suggest using crickets, and if you do have crickets, I would take them out the box they come in and put them in something bigger, partly because when you try to open that little box, they're going to probably escape, and also I just think it's fairer for them, and probably more will survive if you keep them in a bigger tub. When it comes to buying crickets, you can get them from shops, but a lot of the time, in my personal experience, the ones in the shops, you get like half dead ones. I actually get mine off eBay, and they're here like within a day or two, and I usually get, I think, 200 in a pack with the size I get. The smaller you get, usually you get more. I get 3 tubs for either 7 or 8 quid, and the crickets will last me about a month or just over a month. The waxworms, if I get them, will last longer. So really, if you only have one gecko, because this is for 4, and you can get the crickets to last by feeding them well, then you can only probably be looking at paying 1 to 2 quid a month for food for leopard geckos. Another thing you'll have to consider though is you will have to buy the calcium and the vitamins, definitely, for them. For crested geckos though, you don't need to give them live food, it's really just an option. Some will have absolutely no desire to eat live food, some totally different, they do. This is the food that pretty much everyone suggests. It's Rapashi, Superfoods, Crested Gecko Diet, and I mean, I paid 16 quid for this, and this is 6 ounces. I don't know how long it lasts, but I've had my Crested Gecko just over 2 weeks, and I mean, I've used hardly any. But I think this could actually last me quite a long time. 16 quid, it's a bit pricey, but there's also the positive that if, say, your parents didn't want you to get a gecko because of the live food and they don't want the crickets in the house and the bugs, I mean, Crested Gecko, you can't go wrong with just powdered food. It's brilliant, really. So for the heating of leopard geckos, they really just need a heat mat. Reason they don't need a light, which I've probably specified in so many of my videos, but it's because leopard geckos will get the heat through their belly, okay, and they don't bask. However, if you are keeping your leopard gecko in a place where there's like no natural light, so they wouldn't be able to specify between day and night, then I can understand using a light that doesn't emit very much heat at all. But all you really need is, I use 7 watt heat mat that will cover 1/3 of the entire tank. I only keep this on in the day, and at night it goes completely off because they need that natural drop at night of temperature. So temperature wise, Crested geckos don't require an heat source such as a heat mat or a light, especially not a light, because lights get really hot and they can actually die of being too hot. So that is something to consider, because it's great that they don't need that heat source, but if it does get really hot where you are, you've got to think, is there something you can use to cool them down? And even an air conditioning system, if the electric goes, what are you going to do? Humidity wise is probably a big pain. I actually thought it would be sort of simple. It says 61%. I can completely spray down the tank and it doesn't really alter, so I don't know if that's just a problem with this. When you look at a Crested Gecko and a Leopard Gecko, their anatomy is quite different, but it does have similarities. For example, they can both drop their tail. Now, it's more common for Crested Geckos to do this, and in the wild, actually quite a lot of them just don't have tails. The difference is a Crested Gecko's tail isn't going to grow back, whereas a Leopard Gecko's will, but it may look odd. Other things I've noticed, so if we look at the Crested Gecko, when I hold my Crested Gecko, she doesn't feel as robust as my Leopard Gecko. So when I'm picking her up, I do kind of feel like you could squish her, which is kind of odd. They have padded feeling feet. It's softer than a Leopard Gecko. However, they do have claws and you can sometimes feel them, but it's not very sharp at all. Another feature is that Crested Geckos don't have eyelids and they can walk up walls, whereas Leopard Geckos do have eyelids and they can't walk up walls. When it comes to Leopard Geckos, they definitely feel a bit tougher, podgier than a Crested Gecko, and one thing I find is their bellies are unbelievably soft. One tip I do say to people is, if you ever curious about how they feel, how they are to handle, go into a pet shop and see if they'll let you handle them. Okay, so generally when it comes to handling, you really only handle them at night, but I am handling her in the day because she was in the cool end, so I know I'm not taking her away from her heat source. Handling and taming wise for both of these types of geckos, I have found extremely easy. Leopard geckos will generally find a hot spot on you and then just go to sleep, or just sit there, and they're really easy when you're watching TV or on your computer, and as long as you keep an eye on them and you don't just move about too crazily, they will tend to just sit on you. As you can see here, Minnie has found a hot spot on my hand and that is where she will remain. When it comes to handling Crested geckos, they do definitely feel slightly different. They have a tail that when you put your finger there, they will curve around it, and one thing I will say is when you're getting them out the tank, watch out that they're not holding on to something like that and you sort of pull them out, because that's probably why their tail comes off. Another thing I notice I do is I sort of shield her. If I'm walking around the house with her, I'll shield her a bit so she doesn't just jump, and they do say when handling a Crested Gecko, be lower to the ground in case they jump. With all this talk about jumping, I was really worried when I was going to get her, but I've noticed that she doesn't really jump too much, and if she's going to, like there, you can tell because her back legs will tense up a little bit and she sort of focuses, so it's not completely random unless they're spooked and they're just like maybe jump everywhere. But I don't know if she's just an exception, because I did see a lot of Crested Geckos on YouTube when I was doing my research that just jumped. Even like people who'd had them for ages said, you know, these guys do jump. So I don't know if it's just her that doesn't really jump too much. But taming wise, I have found, as I said with the Leopard Gecko, I found her really simple. Like the day I got her out, she didn't mind being handled, and ever since then I've handled her, so she's been absolutely perfect. And I sometimes, I don't get annoyed that they're easy to tame, but I find it hard to help people who are struggling with taming their pet, because I don't know why, but the pets I get just tame within maybe 24 hours. It's ridiculous a little bit, but I don't know if it's just me or just the pets I pick, but they seem to just be extremely calm.